It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Hello, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and this is, of course, the cleverly titled Phil Ferguson Show. Thank you so much for listening, and today we've got a really nice episode about leaving religion. I have 4 different people that volunteered to be on the show to tell their, what shall we call it, personal testimony? Is that all right? Yeah. About how they grew up religious and what ended up helping them out. And quite a few of them are activists now in secularism, I guess I call it, atheism, helping to try to find the light for other people, helping people understand how the world works, how science works, and how religion is just flat out patently false. So hopefully you will enjoy those 4. Just real quick, their names are Brian, Damien, Gwen, and Michael. So you should enjoy all of those a little later. And our skeptically investing topic will be about IRAs and Roth IRAs. I received an email, and the essence of the question was, if I put money into an IRA and I avoid taxes, but in the end I have to pay all those taxes anyway, what's the purpose? What's the difference? I end up with the same amount of money, don't I? And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. The other thing, a real quick note, just happened to pull up my monthly totals for the show, and this last month the show had 52,000 downloads, and I was like, that's amazing, an amazing number. I'm astonished and amazed and thankful every time I know that anyone listens to the show, but to think that 52,000 times it was downloaded in a month, and I thank everyone that's gone back and downloaded 100 or more shows, and I really appreciate it. I went and looked at last year to see how I was doing last year, how the show was doing last year, and I noticed that last year, the entire year of 2015, the show had 60,000 downloads for the year. So that gives you a little bit of perspective of the rate of growth to go from 60,000 downloads in a year to 52,000 downloads in a month. Clearly about 10 times bigger, and the rate has just been getting kind of bigger and bigger as we go along. So who knows what the future holds, but hopefully you enjoy the show, and you can leave a review on iTunes, and Stitcher has reviews, and so if you listen through Stitcher or you like the show and would just like to help me out and get a little more credit, Stitcher, in the spiritual and religious podcast section on Stitcher, they have a ranking system, which I love the fact that 4 out of the top 6 spiritual podcasts are atheist podcasts. I am not in that top 6. My show is down around 52, but there's a good mix of religious and atheistic shows. So these are some of the ways that we are changing the world together by listening to podcasts, downloading podcasts, making them better. If there's something that you think I'm doing wrong, you may send me a nice email. I can make adjustments. I have my limits, and I only have so much talent and ability. It's like Rush Limbaugh there for a second. But, I'd like to make the show better where I can. And next week, the show will have Ryan Cragen, and he wrote a book about 10 easy steps to destroy religion. So we're going to have real fun with that next week, and it'll be out just in time for Christmas. So consider that your Christmas gift from me, How to Destroy Religion. So we'll enjoy that next week. And now we're going to talk a little bit about IRAs. I think the first thing I need to do in this kind of discussion is to kind of set forth the parameters, because I'm going to do some math, going to drop some math on you, so hopefully it's not too bad for you. It's not as much as in some other episodes, but we're going to have a little bit of math and throwing out some numbers. the first thing I wanted to mention is that historically in the stock market, stocks have an average dividend of 3.15%. Right now it's closer to 2, give or take, and it depends on which day you look or which month you look. It does fluctuate some, but the norm has been around 3.15, at least over about the last 50 years. But to make the math simpler, I'm going to use 3%. So just know that. I'm also going to use an average return of the stock market of a total of 10%. And again, the last 47 years, based on S&P 500, as you can look up yourself on Wikipedia, it says 10.47. Again, I'm just trying to make this simple to give you a ballpark of how this works. The total return is 10%. Now, keeping in mind that that 10% return includes 3% dividends and 7% stock appreciation. And the reason I'm making this point first is because when you have to consider taxes, that matters. It makes a difference. So those are some things to think about. We're also going to talk about a person who is in the marginal tax bracket of 28%. And the marginal tax bracket means that's the tax rate you pay on the next dollar. So your first 10 or 15,000 might be at 0%, and then at 15%, and then 25%. And these tiers get bigger and bigger, and the percentages get higher and higher, as I think they should. But you don't pay 28% on everything that you made, but you pay 28% on that extra dollar. So every once in a while I'll hear someone say, I got a pay raise and now I make less money because my taxes went up. No, it doesn't work that way. Of course, there could be a rare exception to something, but you only pay that higher rate on the higher amounts of money. The reason I will use the marginal tax rate on investments is because the investments, if they make income and they pay you, that will be added on top of your wages. So kind of a shortcut way of thinking about it is that you've already cleared those lower tax brackets, I hope, and you're now in the 28% tax bracket. Obviously, there's people that pay 33 and 39, and we're not even going to consider state taxes in this consideration because some states, the state tax is 0, and some it's close to, I think California can get even over 10%. So it's different, but again, this is just to give you an illustration of the benefit of an IRA versus not an IRA. Not going to go so much into IRA versus Roth IRA. That's a different segment, but some of the same rules would still apply in an IRA versus what I'll call a standard account. It can also be called a non-qualified account, which means it does not have a special privilege in the eyes of the IRS to avoid taxes. It might also be called a joint account, a brokerage account, a traditional account. All of those words are kind of interchangeable, but we're talking about a standard taxable brokerage account like you might have in the 60s or 70s. They still exist today, and it has no special privilege in the eyes of the IRS. The next piece of information that we need to have is how much we're going to invest. We're going to invest $5,000, and you're going to be really, really good at your investing. You're going to make market returns. You're not going to underperform. You're going to make simply 10%. Clearly, at the end of a year, if there's no tax consequences, if you're in some kind of tax privileged account, you'll go from $5,000 to $5,500. Real straightforward, real simple. You made 10%. In a standard account, if you do not buy or sell anything, if you have no trading costs, and you simply have taxes, you could end up with $5,458. So it's a little less. It's not that much less. It's, $42 less, because you do have to pay your marginal tax rate in this scenario of 28% on the 3% of growth that came from historical average stock dividends. So those dividends come to you and you have to pay taxes on them. One of the things that people often make mistakes when they're looking at the performance of their portfolio and comparing it to the index, you get a statement from Edward Jones, Franklin Templeton, whoever you get your statement from, Raymond James, Valak, it doesn't matter. You look at it and it will have performance on there. People, if you're in a taxable account, you need to adjust it down by the taxes you paid on those investments so that you get a more accurate comparison. Now, I'm going to take it a step further because that example of the standard account on the $5,458 is not really reasonable for most people because you also have to pay tax on the 7% if any of it is sold. So one of the things we talk about on the show regularly is turnover. And mutual funds, where most people invest, or if you have a broker picking you stocks, if you buy and sell stocks that are owned less than a year, or your mutual fund buys or sells stocks that you own less than a year, you have to pay short-term gains tax, which is your marginal tax rate on all of the gains on anything that's held less than a year. So to take it to the full extreme, I created another calculation that is based on 100% turnover. The average stock mutual fund in the United States has a turnover between 80 and 120%. So this is not an unreasonable number. Some of the things will be held more than a year, so it probably won't be this bad. But in that scenario, if you had the IRA with no taxes, no consequences, you just made 10%, $5,000 turns into $5,500. In a taxable account with no trading activity, it would be $5,458. In an account that had 100% turnover, where everything that you made got taxed at 28%, your return is $5,360. Clearly, this difference is not particularly huge, but when we run this out for 40 years, and maybe you don't have 40 years of investing, but maybe you do. If it's 10 years, it's not going to be as dramatic as this. But you run it out for 40 years, just this one-time contribution of $5,000. In the IRA, you will have $226,000. In the standard account, where you traded nothing, you never, ever traded, no stocks went to zero and had to be replaced, an unrealistically optimistic scenario, but it's there for our consideration. The return is $166,000. So you go from 226 to 166. If you're in the account that has 100% turnover, so either you or your broker or the mutual funds that you invest in turn over 100% every stock, every year, and every gain you make is taxed at your marginal tax rate, the total return is $80,700. So we went from 226 down to 80,000. So in a taxable account, you're likely to be somewhere between 166 and 80. I don't know, let's just call it 120, something like that. 150 if you're doing really well and you have very little trading activity. But all of those numbers are less than the 226 in the IRA. And the reader that sent the question brought up the point that, well, wait a minute. When I take my money out of the IRA, I now have to pay taxes. And the question is, what will be your marginal tax rate in the future? I have no idea. So for this scenario, I assumed, again, 28%. You may think that is too low or too high, and you can adjust this if you so wish. But if you pulled out everything, assuming that doesn't affect your marginal tax rate, which might not be reasonable, but it would be worth $162,000. Actually, $163,000. We're going to round it a little bit. So in the IRA, even after paying taxes, you have $163 versus what could be the ideal of $166 versus $80. And you could point out that, wait a minute, $163 is actually smaller than $166 in the standard account. And that's true, but in that standard account, if you want to spend that money, you have to sell everything there, and you have to pay capital gains. And the capital gains, at least on an account of that size, and if you're in the 28% tax bracket, you're going to pay 20% capital gains. So you don't get 166, you would get 133. So the ideal situation of a standard account where you never, ever, ever trade anything and you never pay any taxes on the growth until the end where you sell it, you would have 133, And if you paid all the tax on everything you made in the IRA at the end, at your marginal rate, you'd have 163. So the IRA made you about $30,000 extra on a $5,000 investment. Now, of course, it takes 40 years, a shorter time frame. These differences are obviously nowhere near as large. But if you get to choose a net of $163,000 or $133,000, which do you want? I want the $163,000. In the account that has 100% turnover, there would be no capital gains because you're paying taxes every year, so there would be no tax to take any of that money out, and it would still be $80,000. So after tax consequences, you have 163, 133, or 80,000. It's still really simple for me to say I want the $163,000. Another benefit of IRAs, and this applies to IRA and Roth IRA, is if you intend to leave some of that money to your children, to your heirs, to any other individual, your spouse, they get what it becomes what is called an inherited IRA. And sadly, I received one of these recently when my mom passed away. And that money comes to me. It's still in an IRA, but I will now have to take out money every year, whether I want to or not, which seems fair. It's been avoiding taxes all these years. And I will have to take it out based on my age, not based on the rate my mom was taking. So for me, being 49, almost 50, I have to take out, about 2.5% of that money, which means 97% of it stays in there again and continues to grow tax deferred. So if I'm lucky and I live 30, 40 or more years, that money gets to keep growing and compounding and avoiding taxes year after year after year after year. So these are some of the reasons it's so incredibly important that you try whenever possible to put as much money as you can in an IRA or a Roth IRA or a 401k or a 403b, which is often called a tax-sheltered annuity or a TSA. It is the one time the word annuity is used that doesn't bother me. You just kind of ignore the word annuity and know that a 403b is very similar to a 401k. And of course, when you leave a job and you have a 401k or a 403b, you can roll all those over into IRAs, traditional IRAs, and you can continue to keep enjoying that tax-deferred growth for a very long time. And if you send the money to your inheritance, if they're the beneficiaries, they will be able to extend that for a very long time, over their entire lifetime. So many reasons to use IRAs and Roth IRAs. Hopefully that helped make it clear, and I appreciate it. And we're going to do a little break here, and then we're going to start into our 4 different loss of faith stories. Enjoy. All right, now with me I have another deconvert, I guess is the right way to call it, Michael Bigelow. Michael, how are you?
I'm doing really good this morning. How are you, Phil?
This morning, I love it. I'm recording late at night, but for you it's morning somewhere?
It is. It's 10 o'clock in the morning in Macau. Yep.
And what is Macau? Is that like in Canada?
Well, not quite. Macau is right across the mouth of the Pearl River from Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is about a 40-mile boat trip from here. And Macau is connected to mainland China, which is the majority of where my business is.
Excellent, excellent. So at some point, you left religion? You were just a casual kind of Christian-y kind of guy? What was that story there?
Actually, it's a longer story than that, because I was not just a casual Christian kind of guy. I was raised in the 60s in a very devout, extended family of Jehovah's Witnesses. And I managed to come to believe it as the truth, and did everything the way I was supposed to, married a girl in the truth, eventually became a ministerial servant, which is kind of like a deacon. And then when I was 30, I was appointed as an elder, which is a position of pretty high responsibility within a particular congregation. And then I served as an elder in congregations in the United States, in Taiwan, and the last one was in Macau.
Did I tell you about the letter I got last week from a Jehovah's Witness?
Actually, I saw something on your Facebook about that, related to your mom's death. Yeah, that's...
and it came from...
It's too bad. It struck me as a bit of ambulance chasing, if you will.
Well, I think you're right. It came from the state of New York, the great state of New York, and it looked like a mimeographed letter, which nothing says I care about you more than a mimeograph in this day and age. And it was, kind of sorry to hear about your loss, but there's hope, and here's why. And it was just a half a dozen random bullshit Bible verses. And then some printed materials from the, what do they call it? The Watchtower cult, the organization, what do they go by now?
Well, the official name of the organization is the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. But more recently, they've started to be known more as JW.org, which is kind of odd because the J is Jehovah and W is Witness. And it's almost like they've created this, real brief acronym for Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
But it relates quite a bit, I would say, to them becoming more and more media-based. They've got this very slick broadcasting thing now called JWTV, where they put a lot of content up on the internet for people to view.
Well, that's quite savvy.
Yeah. Well, I think some of it's marketing, but I speculate that it's also related to the difficulty that they're having drawing experienced men to serve as leaders within their congregations. Because even while I was still in the organization, that was a problem.
Well,
so I think what they're doing is producing more content to kind of compensate for the fact that they don't have as many men joining into the organization as they used to.
Well,
I think that very well could be part of it.
You said at 30 you were an elder. Elder seems like it should be someone at least over 30. So what was your job as an elder?
Well, an elder is a really responsible position. You can pretty much count on being on the platform, teaching and preaching every week. You also have the responsibility for helping people who are going through personal problems, maybe a death in the family, maybe a sickness, maybe a child who is rejecting the family religion, maybe marital problems, or maybe they've done something that would put themselves in line for the congregational judicial process, the formal means that the congregation has for punishing people for doing things that they shouldn't. And they have a very specific process. It's almost like a mini trial.
And you were kind of in charge of that?
Yeah, I was responsible for running those on occasion.
And how many years of education did you get? What kind of training to get that job?
Well, the education is sort of progressive. It almost starts when you're a kid because they enroll you in a school that has weekly meetings that teaches you how to speak in front of other people. And then once you become a ministerial servant, they start to give you pretty formal training, classroom training that teaches you how to deliver scriptural counsel. I mean, when I talked about helping people with personal problems, certainly you're not a counselor in the sense of being a secular counselor. You're a counselor in the sense that you know which Bible verses to use to help people be encouraged and help overcome particular scriptural or spiritual issues.
And of course, since you're on the show, that somehow didn't take or keep, or what happened?
In my case?
Yeah.
My case is really odd because...
I like odd.
Then this is going to do it for you. It was not driven by this new atheism movement. It was not driven by some of the complaints that people have about Jehovah's Witnesses theologically. A lot of people that leave Jehovah's Witnesses do so because of failed prophecies and revisions to their teachings, or maybe about the blood issue, or maybe about the fact that they deny science. Going back even to the 1980s, I loved the Sierra Nevada mountains. And probably that, as much as anything, was the thing that started me to examine the natural world through the lens of science and skepticism. Because Jehovah's Witnesses have a default view about geology. Anything that you see in the natural world, it doesn't matter if it's a mountain or a polar cap or a river or a desert, anything. It was all underwater 4,400 years ago, or it's a landform that kind of created itself since then. And in the months and months of time that I've spent climbing in the Sierras and just looking at the landforms and looking at the living glaciers and looking at the evidence of extinct glaciers, the Noah flood thing just started to seem impossible. So I started to research it and realized that the Earth has gone through a series of ice ages, which is something that just used to be laughed at in my family. I mean, it was really a joking point. And then that kind of combined with the problem of evil, and not the classic problem of evil that we all know about as atheists now. I was more concerned about the natural evil that the planet did. For example, if you research lightning on the internet, you type in lightning and school and Africa, you'll find out that with fairly regular frequency, lightning strikes a school and a bunch of kids die. Or earthquakes, or volcanoes, or hurricanes, or like you have in the Midwest there, the twisters. These are things that are not caused because Adam and Eve supposedly ate a piece of fruit and therefore were cursed. These are things that the planet is doing to kill people. And my reasoning was that just did not reconcile with a loving God. And Jehovah's Witnesses don't have an answer to that, even to this day. They call it the most difficult question. So those two things really started me to question seriously the foundation of my faith, and that led me to studying all manner of different forms of science. I studied pre-human history, I studied tree rings, I studied ice core technology, I studied geology, dating methods. I spent probably 5 years studying deeply into the things that the Watchtower publication said, don't trust those, don't read those, that's all from Satan. And I was wrong, and they are certainly wrong.
Well, maybe they actually had a point. If you didn't read all that stuff, maybe you would still be there.
That's probably true.
Now, so as you're reading and learning about science, did you stay in they don't call it church, do they? You stayed in a local community center? What's the right name?
Well, they have Kingdom Halls. You'll see them. They're all over the United States. And they are places where you come together for weekly worship. At the time that I was in, it was twice a week. And then once a week, you would also have sort of a smaller meeting in a private home. But now it is just twice a week that they meet together at the Kingdom Halls. But that's very much the center of congregation activity. They don't call it a church, they call it a congregation. And the answer to the question is yeah. As I was discovering these things, I was going through a mental hell, because I was actually in charge of the congregation in Macau. I was the senior most person in that congregation. And it's a congregation of just the most wonderful, humble Filipino people who are in Macau working primarily as domestic servants. And I'm told that I was really good at what I did. When people needed help, I provided the help that they gave. I'm told that my teaching from the platform was effective. So during that time, there was two mics. One mic was one who was trying to be a good shepherd and teacher from the platform.
Right.
And the other mic was this guy who knew he was being dishonest and was trying to find a way to keep from going insane, or maybe even worse.
And
it was a really bad time.
When did that break? What led you to stop going?
Well, what happened is I knew by 2006 that I had no belief in the supernatural or in gods in any way whatsoever. And it's not easy to quit being an elder. But finally what I did was I wrote a letter and I said, I no longer want any responsibility in your congregation. It's personal. I don't want to talk about it. Leave me alone. I've done a good job for these people for a long, long time. Just leave it alone. And they were very good about it. But then over the course of the next 3 years, my wife and also my children came to realize that there was something seriously wrong with my thinking, because my wife certainly saw that some of the stuff that I was reading, and I had expressed some doubts to her. And finally, my two sons and my wife basically said, we know the direction that your thinking is heading, and if you don't do something within the congregation about it, then we're going to. Which I knew what the ultimate kind of destiny was for me, that I was going to have to write a letter and resign from the group if I was ever going to move on and be able to do something different with my life, which maybe we can talk about a little bit later on.
Well,
so as soon as I heard that from my wife and my children, who were very devout Jehovah's Witnesses, I wrote a letter, and at the end of a meeting handed it to two other elders that were there, and basically the letter said, I quit. I'm no longer one of you. And that leads to like a formal announcement where a week later they say, Mike Bigelow is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And that is what triggers a very harsh form of shunning, which essentially means you lose your family, with the exception of my wife.
Well, and how are your kids now?
From what I understand, they're doing okay. I don't talk to them.
I'm sorry. I guess I didn't know that. But your wife is still talking to you?
She is. We have a very good relationship. It's been hard for her, but there's bounds. There's conversations we won't have. We don't talk about science. We don't talk about religion. But I'm supportive of her continued zeal for her religious beliefs. I don't deride them. She knows that I have huge problems with the organization for teaching people things that are provably false, but I don't bring that to a personal level against her.
I understand. Now, you had at some point said that you are now an activist, I guess, for the other team, for the secular world. What does that entail? What do you do?
Well, as soon as I quit, which was back in September of 2012, I contacted a guy here in Hong Kong who has become a very close friend. His name is David Young, and he's an organizer here in Hong Kong for the Hong Kong Society for Science and Skepticism. And we run two groups. One is a pure atheist group, but the other group is more related to debunking pseudoscience, promoting real science, and then occasionally throwing in things related to faith. And we've used that society as a means of bringing in international figures to speak to universities, speak to our own group, and that's something that has been, it's been great for me, and it's been good for the local area too. For example, you probably know the biologist Jerry Coyne. We just finished a visit where we brought him over to Hong Kong. We took him into mainland China. He had the opportunity to talk to a lot of groups, and I had this awesome privilege of being able to interview him in front of a large audience, and so it's that kind of thing that we're doing now. In addition to that kind of advocacy, because my name is now out there as someone who left the Organization of Jehovah's Witnesses and left from a position of fairly high responsibility, I've had just a tremendous privilege of having personal contact with literally hundreds of people who have reached out to me who are either going through the same thing that I went through or are trying to cope with the pain and suffering that comes from being shut off and shunned by their own families. So that has been that's kind of my, when I'm not working, that's the kind of thing that keeps me going. That's my advocacy.
Yeah, I mean, I left religion at 13, and my parents just said it was a phase, and that was probably the most difficult repercussion I've had through the whole ordeal. The thought that my two kids might not talk to me ever again, that sounds pretty rough, dude.
It is. And it's especially rough knowing what they think their future is, because if you're a good Jehovah's Witness parent, you teach your child that the most important thing that they can do is go out in the evangelizing work and tell people what the truth according to Jehovah's Witnesses is. And basically what that truth is, Phil, is that any day now, God is going to enact this war of Armageddon, and everybody who is not one of Jehovah's Witnesses, in all likelihood, is going to be killed. So knowing that is the life purpose of my kids is, it's unfortunate. It makes me sad.
So if anyone's listening to this and they're currently in a congregation of Jehovah's Witness, I guess is the right way to say it, and they have questions, can they contact you? What should they go to some website? What do they do to get more information?
Absolutely, they can contact me directly, or if they just type in Michael Bigelow Macau, Michael Bigelow Hong Kong, they'll find me.
Okay,
and that's how most people who have contacted me have found me.
Sure.
I would say on a regular basis, I get probably 3 or 4 hits a week from new people who find me on Facebook Messenger.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. And now I'm getting kind of on the longer side for these little segments that I'm doing, but we're in no particular hurry. Is there anything else that you want to cover? Tell us about your deconversion or the group that you used to be in.
Well, I guess the main takeaway is that they're a group who teaches things that are provably false, and they weave those into a narrative that make people believe that they are living in the last days, and it's just not true. I didn't make it not true. I discovered it's not true, and they can too.
All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for sharing your very personal story on the Phil Ferguson Show. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Phil. I appreciate the time that I've spent with you.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Dan Widdicombe says slavery has to be considered in context. What's more relative than that? There were people at the time, Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, there were innumerable humanists and secularists who said slavery is evil. The church wouldn't agree. Now, which is it then? Is it that the church is wrong, or, even more suggestive, that God has not yet revealed that it's wrong to them? Or did God support it all those years and then change his mind? From a beginning point of absurdity, you arrive at a terminal point of absolute moral chaos. And I think you've at least done us the favor of making that plain this evening. God, in short, God did not make man in his own image. It is precisely to the contrary. Mammals and primates made many gods and many churches in their own rival images.
All right, everybody. You're still listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. And, of course, I'm Phil Ferguson. And with me I have another deconvert. It's Damien Marie Adhope. Damien, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm
glad to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you for coming on the show. Now, we were talking a little pre-show. I always say that because it sounds like it's really interesting. Just when we were talking, you grew up in Christianity, but it wasn't. Was it like Methodist, Baptist, what?
Okay, well, I grew up in Christianity as like the overarching religion theme that I was under, but I was actually until 13 I was raised in a religious cult called the local church. They don't even like a name. That's actually not their name.
They're just called.
If you look online, if you look local church cult, you'll probably find something. It's Witness Lee and Watchman Nee from China. Anyways, it's just think of it is most understandable for most people to grasp what it was like, kind of like Jehovah's Witness. Very, very strict, very insular. We did not do anything that wasn't religion. We did not watch TV. In fact, the TV was locked in the closet that we only watched once a week. Let me just quote. I know we watched the Mutual of Omaha program. I believe it was once a week. If it was more than that, I don't really remember. But that's all we watched. We watched Mutual of Omaha, like the one show. That's it. Closet locked. No
wow,
TV.
So no Fantasy Island, no Love Boat when you were growing up?
No. We were not allowed to go to friends' house because they would have an outside influence from the world.
Wow.
They did the weirdest thing to think about what they did to see how odd they are. They did this thing called pray reading, where they actually go through the Bible and each word would you hear 300 people doing it? Oh, it's so creepy because they go the word, oh God, the word was made, Lord, oh the word was made. I mean, but they go through the whole Bible like this, but it's 300 people chanting the Bible. Oh, it's the creepiest. Anyways, I'm sorry, but
wow,
it's something else.
You should sneak in a recorder and catch some of that.
Yeah,
that'd be neat.
What I feel like is now understanding stuff. I have a psychology degree, a bachelor's, is that it's almost like a hypnosis now. I get it because they're chanting it,
right?
So like they've been programming these words right into themselves. And I was thinking too, as an atheist, what better way to read the Bible to not understand it by reading it like that? I mean, you can't possibly understand it reading it like that.
That is neat. Now, I'm assuming dancing was out.
Oh yeah, come on, dancing. You couldn't listen to radio. In fact, my dad took the radio out of my mom's car just in case she was tempted to accidentally listen to the radio.
Now, what was the name of this group again?
It's called we said the name of it.
Yeah,
The Local Church. Just by Witness Lee, and Watchman Nee was the one from China that he was emulating.
Well, all right. So I'm assuming they had a fixation with sex as well.
Well, you mean that you couldn't have it? Yeah. Of course. But like all good shamers, yeah.
Yeah, they got to. And how did your parents get involved with this?
They were in it from the time I was born. Let's see. I think my dad was in it. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. I hated the religion, so I didn't want to learn nothing about it. But how did my dad get into it? My dad, I think what happened, my dad is now does jewelry, my father, but he was a construction worker. And I know that I remember as a kid several times going to the leader's house and building his house with my dad. You know what I'm saying? Doing construction for free.
Yeah, sounds great. If you're the leader.
Yeah, because what better benefit than the leader of a cult? Of course, they're not a cult because they actually try to go to court and say that they're not a cult, which is what a cult does.
Yeah. And so
they go threaten people and they do lawsuits. Sounds like a cult.
And you said around 13 you left this group?
Well, my mom left actually at 7, and I ended up getting almost left there. What happened is I wasn't able to leave in a sense. The court said until I was they consider a minor with the right to choose. Well, once I choose, I didn't want to be with my father. But my mother has a completely different, wacky kind of. She's a evangelical, Pentecostal, non-denominational, singing, dancing in the aisles, yelling, hands in the air, talking in tongues, chanting words from God. I mean, it's complete another type of. I was like, oh no.
And so, how did you not get this DNA?
Well, I think I just have reason because I remember thinking my dad's this pray reading. It just was so creepy to me, even with that kid understanding thing. Just I mean, I was like, something's not right about this. So I like you said, how did I know? I just had that inkling that something was did not feel safe or I don't know. It just felt not good about that. My mom's. It felt bizarre. It didn't feel as the safe problem, but it felt just how are they? Because I even said to her, "How do you guys do all this mumbling? You keep saying it's. I don't get it." And she was like, "Well, you have to try." And I mean, I earnestly tried. Like you said, that's why I didn't get the DNA. Well, I did get the belief in God, but I thought these people have like the belief correct, maybe, but how they practice is just bizarre. I never bought that part. Because they like even when, but I guess I did buy it. By 15, I did believe I was possessed by demons. I mean, I actually believed it. I was crying and scared that my mom was going to find out I was demon possessed. Which is crazy because all it was I was just horny. You turn puberty. Well, that's a demon.
Yeah.
But also, I wanted to do drugs and alcohol, which can hurt other demons. So, and I really thought that I had these demons. And my mom, just how crazy my parents were about religion, just like not even for Christians, even though they're a little extreme. When my dad, when ColecoVision came out, my dad bought the little game for like Monsters or whatever, and when he brought it home, my mom physically started turning red, crying, started shaking, saying she's a bad mom. We fought demons in the house. I mean, it was like crying. She broke the game right with my dad with a hammer in the garage. Something I think that's what they did with it. Because now I think about, no, I'm not sure exactly, but they did something. I think they did that. I do know that what they did, they got oil and they walked around the house a whole bunch of times and anointing the windows with oil so the demons can't get out, or I guess maybe the ones in need to leave. It's just and you think about that as a kid, I was like you said, I thought I had demons, but I'm watching this oil going, I don't think that's going to do it. And it's so weird. You can believe in magical entities, but yet I won't believe in magical spells like rubbing oil on the windows.
I one time went to a Catholic baptism, and the priest held up these two vials, and one casts out the demons, and then one allows Jesus to enter. And when he actually did the ceremony on the infant a couple seconds later, he used the oils in the wrong order. And so he let Jesus in, and then he cast him out. It busted me and my friends up, but we couldn't tell the family because no one else noticed. And obviously the priest couldn't tell which was which, but it just cracked us up that they believe that these oils, like you said, they do something. It's comical.
But it's bizarre because that kind of thought would only occur in the unreasonable, cauldron of thinking, which is religion. Because if you told anyone else, hey, I'm going to rub oil on the windows, I'm going to walk around the house 7 times because my son bought a ColecoVision game, you would be like, should I call the police or just, the medical professionals? You know what I'm saying?
So you never got to play the game, I assume?
Like, what?
You're
kidding, right?
You never got to play the game, I guess.
For half an hour? No, come on. You can't be serious. But, that's what I think but know what that really gives me? Like, I was a believer. Like, so I the whole time I 100% believed in God. Never once doubted the God question. I didn't even really doubt the Bible. I just thought the people were reading it, like my family, were flawed completely. But so I ended up getting sober on drug and alcohol because I grew up in Southern California and I grew up around violence and gangs and drugs and alcohol. And like I said, I had a lot of problems with my family.
Right.
I still am not close at all to my family. My family's like pastors in Illinois, pastors in California, pastors in where's else there? I think Nebraska or something, Kansas. I don't know. Just like my whole family's like they're all super religious. I mean, I pretty much, if they didn't disown me outright, it's so hard to talk to them in a sense now. We really can't have good conversations. It's pretty sad.
So how was it you left religion or the church?
How I left religion was I got on drugs and then I got sober. Once I got sober, they start pushing, the God stuff even more, and I became more religious. Because as a child, I wasn't really religious. So as an adult, I started becoming religious. And godness. So then after being sober a while, I wanted to be a drug and alcohol counselor because I wanted to help people. So I was a truck driver and I was teaching people. And so being a truck driver, I had seen a lot of people and I thought, well, I'm pretty good working with people. So I tried out for counseling. I can do this. And it seemed pretty easy to me, actually. Anyways, when I started doing that, they told me, well, you need to take 2 classes on religion because you're going to be dealing with clients that will have certainly someone will have a different religion no matter what religion you have. And I thought, well, I don't need more religion. I mean, I'm a Christian, so I don't need more religion. And they said, well, you have to take this class. It's not an elective, whatever. One was the world religions, and then another one was understanding the Bible.
Sure.
So I took the world religions first. And actually, no, first thing that happened before I took the world religions, what got me to start questioning God, or sort of the whole path starting, was I took a biology class, and they told me that female is the default in a sense, or almost intersex is the default towards gender. And then it takes 3 processes to make a male. You have to have anti-feminizing androgens, masculizing androgens, and testosterone, all in a certain sequence, like you said about the oils. If it goes wrong, those sequences are not to the right time, amount, whatever, they can create an intersex child. And I am mildly intersex. And that also is something I didn't know. My parents never treated me like the firstborn, and I am the firstborn of 3 kids. I never understood why until I understood later from the doctor telling me when I was 20-something, 21, 22, that I was intersexed. I realized the reason why my parents had never accepted me as the firstborn, because they didn't see me as being a real male, like something I was born wrong. And worse than that really is they never told me. But anyway, I don't want to go on that. I'll go back to about being an atheist.
Yeah.
So when I went to college, I don't need to get distracted.
No, it's all good. You had these classes.
Yeah, so the classes. So when I started, so I took the religion classes, right? That was really the big point, was the religion class, because I never even knew anything about religion. I mean, if you'd asked me, like, can you please tell me 5 religions or 10 religions in the world, I would have said, Christian, Catholic, Jehovah's Witness, Mormon, Islam, which is funny now because most of those are just Christian, but I didn't even know that. You know what I'm saying? I actually thought those were separate religions. I was so stupid. But it was ignorant, raised, insular. Wow. So, but anyways, it was kind of good though for me in a sense, because I never had experienced other religions. So when I had to do a paper on one a week, learning a lot about them, I didn't have any preconceived, in a sense, I didn't even know about them.
Right.
So, but when I learned, it was awesome for me because I had to do so many so quickly. And I started to go, you know what? I see a common theme. They all have the morality, right? Every single one. They don't use someone else's, they use their own, their way to the afterlife. They know the way. Only they do. They all think that. Then I said, wow. And then I also realized they also tell you how to live your life, every single one of them. I mean, man, they're all doing the same thing. And listening to 10 religions, they're all pretty much doing the same kind of thing. I started going, if they're all fake, why is Christianity real?
Yeah, that's the edumacation stuff for you. That'll mess you up every time.
Yeah, you start going, how is it that different?
Right.
So, but that just got me thinking. That didn't like lose the God thing. It just started making me go, maybe Christianity is not true. Still wasn't in a sense attaching that the God had to be not true. But I started going, maybe Christianity is not true. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. So I just started being open. But then I thought, oh, great, my next class is going to be on the Bible. Dude, I've read the Bible twice. My parents have been so religious, it's not funny. I mean, I've read the NIV and the King James Christianity Bible and the whole thing. And so I felt like I'm going to ace this class. Man, it was one of the hardest classes I had in college because it was like archaeology and then comparative, religion, as far as like saying, like where the some of the texts, come from Babylon, the Epic of Gilgamesh, whatever. They're like explaining, showing. Dude, I felt like I was drowning. That's what it felt like, because it was so much facts. They were disproving everything I believed so quickly. I felt like it was like an overload. I couldn't, like, oh my world is just like disintegrating under my feet. And then I got halfway through the class to the portion where it explained the devil, Lucifer, the serpent. I was done. I mean, I went from 100% God belief, just kind of like doubting, or like questioning kind of what's going on, to once I got it, it was just gone. It just, because I realized it's just an empty belief. I don't even have anything to even justify this. Not only is Christianity not right, God concept is not even coherent.
And it was that fast, huh? Just 2 classes.
Dude, it was halfway through the second class of the Bible.
We need to teach those classes in every high school then, I think.
Well, I can't say everyone will learn what I was learning, but because this is what reason why I was thinking what I was watching, because I even called my mom, because I was, religious. So I called my mom because I took the class and I was so angry about the state. And I go, Mom, did you know that Lucifer is actually light bearer? Light bearer had to do with Babylon or Persia or whatever. It has to do with it didn't have to do with Satan at all. In fact, it was a mistranslation of the King James Bible that people just keep saying, but it never meant that. And I said, even your concordance, because I had the same book as her, so I knew, because we didn't just do a Bible, we did a Bible with the whatever it's called, the concordance, I think. I can't remember exactly, but whatever, it has it tells you like about extra information about the Bible.
Right.
It's like a study Bible or something, whatever. Can't remember now, but it was like it cost me like $78 or something. It was, I was gung ho. So I said, I even looked in my book and it actually says it right in front of my eyes. Did you see this? Did you know this? Because I knew she had been studying the Bible more than me. I'm like, I never knew this. And she said, well, I still believe. I said, whoa, wait a minute, Mom. We are looking at, even in our own Bible that we agree to, it says in the concordance, this is not accurate. And I said, you know what? I'm going to believe what's true. No, I'm not going to keep belief if it's not true.
And so what do you do now? Are you just a casual non-believer? You involved with atheism?
Oh, no, I'm very active. Well, in school, I got to 7 classes in my master's, and I kept arguing with people online because they would tell me, you have to be agnostic. You have to be skeptic. You have to do this. You have to do that. And I was like, okay, I hear you feel that way, but I don't have that position. I'm a rationalist. In fact, I can tell anybody that I don't even need skepticism. Not saying I don't use it or that it doesn't have value. I'm saying I can destroy most premises and never appeal to skepticism. It's not required for me. That reason is a powerful tool that cuts like a knife. As long as you have the correct ontology of what you're talking about. In other words, like if I say evolution is true, this is a strong premise that I can support with justification. As long as I know this, they cannot tell me that creationism is justified. I don't care how much passion they feel about it. Like my mom, I don't care if she wants to believe that Lucifer is the devil. It's not.
Right.
That's an empirical fact. Looking in your own Bible. But also maybe when she did that, it was probably good for me too, because it was a juxtaposition. Here I am seeking. I wasn't even sure about what I wanted to do about my growing disbelief, but I was questioning with her. I was willing to challenge myself, even challenge her, and ask her, what do you think? I'm thinking about this. And then when I saw her close down and choose the lie over the truth, that was done for me. I said, I want to be a truth seeker. I just don't care. I want what's true. It doesn't mean that, because some truths are not nice. It's true that I'm going to die, but that doesn't mean how I can live my life. And that is more important to me.
Excellent. Do you have a blog or webpage or something people can reach you at?
Yeah. My blog is just my name, DamianMarieAtHope.com. My website is also my blog. So, it's got stuff on there. And I'm on Facebook. I have 2 main profiles, and I have a writer page, and I also have other pages for atheism.
Well, excellent. Damian, thank you for sharing your story, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join me on the Phil Ferguson Show.
Right on. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
Hey, thanks. Have a good night.
All right. Bye.
Here's an excerpt from Our Constitution, The Way It Was by Dr. Madeleine O'Hare.
Seemingly, no one knew just what to do. There was no clear-cut program. Some wanted to try to continue to negotiate with the British government. Others wanted to continue the armed revolt in the hopes of forcing the king and parliament to remedy their grievances. There was no one, apparently, who had the vision to call for complete severance of all political ties with Britain and to found a new nation. The situation remained stalemated until the end of the year. Then, in January 1775, Thomas Paine's pamphlet, Common Sense, came off the press. It was like a fresh wind clearing away a fog. In the simple yet forceful language that characterizes all his writings, Paine showed the absurdity of continuing a relationship of colonies to a mother country. Why, he asked, should the colonies, already peopled with 3 million inhabitants and destined to expand to cover a vast continent, be ruled from a small island 3,000 miles away? Why continue to be subjects of a tyrant king when the way was open to be citizens of a free republic? This pamphlet spread like wildfire. The small presses of the time could not keep up with the demand. Hundreds of thousands of copies were issued and penetrated to every colony in a short time. Paine's arguments were unanswerable. They left no middle ground. All talk of compromise and further petitions to Parliament died out. The debate was carried into the Continental Congress, and in a couple of months, a committee was appointed to draw up a formal statement. Thomas Jefferson was selected by the committee to make the draft. 6 months, almost to the day, after Paine's Common Sense appeared, Congress issued that famous document, which we call the Declaration of Independence. It has often been claimed that Paine actually composed and wrote the Declaration. This is debatable, and there seems to be no strong evidence to that effect, but that he was the man, more so than any other, who caused it to be written, no one can deny. All of the leaders of the Revolution gave him full credit for solidifying the sentiment for independence. Washington, converted by common sense, wrote asserting that Paine's words were, quote, sound doctrine and unanswerable reasoning. Jefferson, John Adams, Franklin, and Madison all wrote praising Paine's flaming arguments. In later years, Thomas Jefferson said of Paine, quote, no writer has exceeded Paine in ease and familiarity of style, perspicuity of expression, happiness of elucidation, and in simple and unassuming language, end quote. Franklin said, I value myself on the share I had in procuring for America the acquisition of so useful and valuable a citizen as Thomas Paine. John Adams wrote, history will ascribe the Revolution to Thomas Paine.
Our Constitution, The Way It Was by Dr. Madeleine O'Hare, is now available at atheistaudiobooks.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Of course, this is Phil Ferguson, and you are still, yes, that's right, still listening to the Phil Ferguson Show on our special episode of people who used to be religious and now they're not religious. And joining me now is Gwen. How are you, Gwen?
I'm great.
And we were talking a little bit pre-show, special magical pre-show, and you were telling me about the denomination you grew up in. What was that called again?
It was called the Christian Missionary Alliance.
Where'd that come from?
It was actually founded in about 1903. It was an offshoot of the Presbyterian Church, founded by A.B. Simpson, who felt that the Presbyterian Church was not spending enough time dealing with the Holy Spirit or focusing on missions or helping the poor and downcast. So it started small and has grown to be a fairly significant denomination. For those who are not familiar with it, it's fairly similar to Southern Baptist.
Wow. Well, so, here we have once again a schism because the main religion wasn't doing it right, and you guys were doing it more better.
Yes, and we thought we had it right. We were the best.
And you said it
had a lot of pride in being a CMA person.
Excellent. You said it focused on the Holy Spirit?
Yes.
Excellent. So what is the Holy Spirit?
The Holy Spirit is the part of God that lives in you and makes your whole life full and helps you know what to do and what not to do.
Well, now all those years, and finally it's been answered. Now I know.
Yes.
So it's kind of like the Thetans from Scientology.
About that, yes.
Yeah, so they kind of possess your body and keep you holy.
Yes.
Well, that is fantastic. Now, you were growing up in this religion. How was it as a kid?
I loved it. My heroes were missionaries. Every year we had a big missions conference, and we always had a missionary stay at our house, and we'd have dinners. And all I wanted to do was to be a missionary to Brazil and work with the Auca Indians. Every chance I had, I read every National Geographic on Brazil. I was in the library trying to learn more. I wanted to learn Spanish so I could learn their language. I wanted to be amazing for God. I loved my church life. I loved going to church. My dad was the janitor for the church, so we actually lived at the church, and I earned money dusting the pews and chipping the gum off from underneath the pews.
Now, you said Indians in Brazil, is that right?
Yes.
Did we talk about Brazil in Portuguese before? This is ringing a bell.
No, I don't think we did.
Oh, well, I should tell you that my daughter is fluent in Portuguese.
Oh, wonderful.
She spent Brazil outside of Sao Paulo.
Okay.
I can't say it
Yes. Right. Yes.
How's your Portuguese?
Yeah. Terrible.
Oh. How about Italian?
Even worse.
Oh, rats. I'm conversational in Italian now.
Okay, yes. No, I for work, I do a lot with computers, and I seem to be able to pick up computer languages without a problem, but other languages, French, Spanish, German, I am miserable. I work very hard and manage to be able to say hello, and that's about it.
Very good. Now, so you were enamored with this idea of being a missionary. Did you ever go on a mission?
I did go on a couple of summer mission trips in the States. So I went as a Child Evangelism Fellowship summer missionary in Vermont the summer I was 15. And then that's when I came to a crisis of faith. And I had studied so much that it no longer made sense to me. And I went through this phase of my life where I believed God was the bad one and Satan was the good one.
Oh, that's different.
Yes. And looking back, if it had even occurred to me that maybe none of it was true, I think I would have become an atheist then. And
this was how old?
I was 15.
All right. Did you leave then, or did something?
I caused lots of trouble at church. Basically, if the church said no to it, I did it. So I would come to youth group high or drunk or other things. And what ended up happening was that because I was making so many bad life choices, bad things started happening. My grades started slipping, and I started having all sorts of problems, which I interpreted to be God punishing me and teaching me that He was right. And at 17, I came back to the church and fully gave my life to God. And this is this big repentance thing, and I was even more committed. I had found out I was pregnant, and that was kind of like the turning point for me. And so I was determined to raise my daughter in the church, and got my life together, went to Word of Life Bible Institute for school, then worked in a Christian nursery where I then met my husband, and he and I became missionaries with a group called International Teams. We worked in the home office. I did the training of the missionaries who were going to be doing children's work, and my husband at the time, he did the financials. So he was in charge of all of the financials for the organization.
Now, you said husband at the time. I want to come back to that. But before we do that, if it's too personal, we can skip it. But so, you became this rebellious teen and just about left religion. And were you forced to go to Sunday school? So that's why you felt you should just have fun with it, or?
Yes, it was required that we go, and I have always enjoyed a good, healthy debate. So I actually managed to burn through 3 different sets of Sunday school teachers before they put the elders in the Sunday school class.
I see.
Because I would challenge. I would ask questions like, if Judas was critical to the plan, why is Judas being punished? That's not fair. And that was a good one to trip up new Sunday school teachers. They didn't seem to know how to handle that question.
Well, that is awesome, because I know my kids did the same thing, because at the time, I mean, I've been an atheist since I was 13, but my wife was in this phase where she was quite religious, and I didn't want to put up a big fight. So the kids went, and the more they went, the less religious they became. And there was about a year, maybe a year and a half, where they kind of made a personal mission to try to bring some other kids with them.
Yes.
On the way out the door. And yeah, so you get all kinds of fun things there when you have a hapless Sunday school teacher who tries to answer a clever child who's thought about it more than they have.
Yes. It felt, and we taught that once saved, always saved. And my salvation experience happened when I was 4.5, and I was really on fire about it. I was excited about it. I then locked my younger sister and the neighbor girl in a dark closet with me. And I said, if you don't pray this prayer with me, you're going to be in hell forever. And it's scarier than this dark closet. And they prayed with me, and I went to Sunday school and said, I have my first 2 conversions.
Wow, you were really on fire, weren't you?
I was very much there. And then just my whole world revolved around it. That was just, I knew nothing else.
And so you were into it, and then teenage rebellion years, you kind of fought back and thought it was crazy, and got pregnant, and got remotivated to go back to church, and went through all this education, got married, and you were working where again?
We were working for an organization called International Teams, and they sent out missionaries to refugees, a lot of missionaries in Eastern Europe, and working specifically with refugees, helping them reestablish their lives.
And so you were the good Christian couple working for a company that does missions, and what happened after that?
We ended up, and actually you might find this interesting, I don't know if you remember the New Era scandal that brought down so many, it was a Ponzi scheme that brought down many Christian organizations. This was in 1994. And my husband, who was in charge of the finances, felt that there was something fishy about New Era, but the leadership wanted to invest in this. It was a deal where you would invest $500,000. They would hold your money for 6 months, and then you'd get double back.
Oh, no way.
Yes. So when my husband couldn't make the leadership understand, we parted ways with the organization and left. And the organization ended up losing, I think, $2 million out of that particular skill or scam that went on. And
was it a scam that focused on churches?
Yes, it was focused on churches, mission boards, nonprofits. It was a pretty big deal. There was even a write-up in Reader's Digest about the accountant from this one nonprofit that was the key to bringing the whole thing down.
Well, I think I just found a new show topic for the future, but how do people not see that getting double your money back is not possible? How does faith?
Well, they were told that it was anonymous donors who wanted to give but didn't want to be known, and that holding on to the funds for the 6 months was just to generate enough interest to cover the costs of the organization.
Oh my God, what a bunch of crap.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so you guys leave your congregation, or you left the missionary?
We left the mission board.
Okay.
And then my husband went back to work as an accountant, and he was doing taxes for a financial investing firm. And we were camping and got the call of God to ministry. So he quit his job, and he went to seminary, and we started guest speaking at small churches, and eventually took our first church in upstate New York. And so I became a pastor's wife, and I played the piano, and I ran the youth group, and I told children's stories during the sermon. And it was the whole 9 yards. And then our marriage fell apart, and I won't go into that because he's not here.
Sure.
But
thank you.
But it was very hard for me when my marriage fell apart because I struggled with why wasn't God blessing us? We were doing everything and then some.
Yeah.
And, we were tithers. We gave over and above. Our entire world was about reaching out. 1 year for Christmas, we ordered 50 copies of the Jesus video, and we delivered one to every house on our street in our neighborhood.
You're that neighbor.
Yes, I was that neighbor.
Oh, my. I've had those neighbors.
Yes. And I look back and I go, wow, yeah, that was me. But after the divorce, I was no longer qualified. Now, we had ended up switching to being Southern Baptist at this point. So I was a Southern Baptist pastor's wife. I was no longer qualified to do anything in the church. So that's why I thought, I know what I can do. I can buy the Christian bookstore that's dying.
Wait. So you bought a Christian bookstore?
Yes.
You did, and you ran it?
Yes.
And
I ran it for almost 2 years.
And of course, it has my favorite section, Christian fiction.
Yes, we had Christian fiction.
I remember when my kids were little, the first time I heard about Christian fiction, my son was in soccer, and someone is sitting there on the sidelines, and she's reading a book. I'm like, wow, someone who reads books, this has got to be a great person to talk to. I said, what do you read? And they told me the title, and I said, I'm not familiar with that. And they said, it's Christian fiction, and I couldn't stop myself.
Uh-huh.
I just busted up, and I'm like, isn't all of Christianity fiction? We didn't talk anymore.
I imagine not.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I sold everything from communion wafers to Bibles, and I did the gold embossing of names on the Bibles, and
of
we
course,
had
you only sold
all the soundtracks for people to sing their solos at church.
One type of Bible, right?
No, actually, I was judged because I had many different types. So I had some people who would come in, and this one man just ripped me up one side and down the other because I was carrying versions other than just the King James Version.
Oh, the King James purists.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. And so the bookstore was doing good?
No, the bookstore was dying when I bought it.
Oh, okay.
And I refinanced my house and cashed out my retirement and bought the store and believed that with God all things are possible, and of course we would turn this around and be profitable.
Did you ever think for a moment that the previous owner might have thought with God all things were possible?
Well, yes and no. That the previous owner was leaving because her husband had gotten a job in another state, so they'd been trying to sell it for that reason, and I didn't know how much they were losing every year until after, because again, it was, I'd had one of these moments where I'd been in the parking lot outside of church, and I'd just been so down about the fact that I couldn't even work in the nursery anymore. And
why couldn't you work in the nursery?
Because I had divorced a pastor.
So, okay. All right. So,
yes.
So you were finding your calling. God told you, buy this bookstore.
Yes. And it was one of those weird moments where it was like I got chills, and I just was like, I'm supposed to buy the bookstore. And so I just ran forward and bought it. It was never a matter of, I did no due diligence on it.
And so you had this bookstore, and God was going to make it all good, and it failed.
Yes, we failed spectacularly. By the time I filed bankruptcy, I was over $300,000 in debt.
Whoa, that's real debt.
Yes.
Wow, that's more debt than the average American has for retirement.
Yes.
And so you filed bankruptcy. What happened to the bookstore?
The bookstore folded with the bankruptcy, and the bankruptcy guy came through and felt that there was no value in any of the materials.
Well, I agree, but
yes, so he turned everything back to me, and I sold it off slowly over eBay.
Did you make some money on the stuff that you sold?
I made a little bit, but it was more just enough to kind of cover a small. Around the same time that the store failed, I met my husband that I'm married to now, and so it provided a small supplement to our income for about 9 months, and then it was gone.
And so the bookstore failed, and you're still religious at this point?
I am. Only my new husband, I've shifted, and one of the things that happened with the bookstore is that I met Christian people from all the denominations, Episcopalians, Catholics.
That's a bad mix.
Yes, it was just, and I made friends with a Presbyterian pastor and a Catholic nun and a Lutheran minister. And so my circle of friends and people that I respected all had very different views on faith. And so my religious views, my faith became very broad, and I became much more of a moderate Christian. So I let go of a lot of the, we have the right way and you have to get saved this way or else you're not truly saved. And then when I met my husband, he was a Presbyterian. And so we started going to a Presbyterian church that was very open. And it was a place where I could really start to explore my ideas about faith. And I was teaching the high school students, and we were going to do the year on martyrs of the faith. And I started studying about the one, and I'm drawing a blank on her name, but it was one of the early martyrs. And she chose to be martyred and leave her infant son motherless because she refused to give up her faith. And I could not come to terms with that being a good thing. I thought she should have lied. She should not have left her child motherless just because of faith.
Right.
And she was following a faction from the church. She wasn't even following the main Christian group at that time. And I found I couldn't teach the lesson, and I didn't show up. So I had somebody else teach the lesson that week, and I stopped going to church. And I didn't go to church for a couple of years, but I continued to read my Bible and pray. And then my own daughter had just a number of coming of age challenges that really stretched my last remaining holds on this is right and this is wrong. And I really came to a crisis of just not knowing what I believed anymore. And so I didn't know what to do with my extra time because I'd stopped going to church. So I started taking college classes online, and I took a class in logic and reasoning.
Uh-oh, now you're in real trouble.
Yes. So I started learning about fallacies and what it takes for an argument to be sound and how to spot things that don't stand up to scrutiny. Then I took a class on the history of mankind, and the key turning point for me was that he started to talk about how, as humans, we have the ability to make things real that aren't real. And the example he used was money. He said, in reality, there is no such thing as money, because money is simply what we agree it is. We all agree that a $20 bill is worth $20, but that piece of paper that's printed with the green ink in and of itself has no value. It's the value we assign to it, and it's because we all agree. And he said it's the same thing with governments. The government isn't an actual thing, it's an agreement. And he did this thing where he talked about how businesses weren't real because you could replace their buildings and they'd still exist. You could replace their people and they'd still exist. And that a business was incorporated by people going into a courtroom and saying special words and having a special ceremony, so to speak. And I suddenly went, that's God in church. it's something that we've just agreed was real, but there's nothing behind it. All my experiences of God being real and testimonies that I had of God answering prayer and such, those were all real only because that's how I interpreted my world, and because I was in a bubble with a whole bunch of other people who interpreted the world the same way.
Wow.
And
so
when
it just ended then, huh?
Yes, and it was to me, it was as dramatic as that moment in The Wizard of Oz when the screen is pulled back and it's just a little guy at the wheels. And it took me a little while to process, but inside it was just like, there's no God.
And
that's
that
the
happen?
only answer that makes sense, is there is no God.
When did that happen?
That happened in December of 2014.
So 2 years ago. So you're a newbie to all this.
Very newbie, yes.
And we talked pre-show. Have you gone to a conference? You mentioned you went to one?
I went to the AHA conference in June of 2014 in Pennsylvania.
Hey, there's a recurring theme with Pennsylvania. A couple episodes ago, and one of the other people I talked to that was coming out of faith is in Pennsylvania. And I was at that conference, by the way.
Oh, wow. That is so cool. I was there with my son. He was the one teenager at the event.
Oh, very nice. And did he come out too, or he just was there to support you?
He came out. He actually, what was interesting is when I told him, I said, you know what? I don't believe in God anymore. And he goes, it's about time you caught up. I haven't believed in God since I was 7.
Yeah, it's a different time. So what do you do now in reference to religion? You just ignore it? Are you getting involved? Are you doing things? What's going on?
Well, I'm on the board for the Central New York Humanists. I'm a secretary for them. And then I run the Syracuse Atheist Group, and we meet 2 or 3 times a month. I'm working on getting more involved, and I'm looking forward to about another year of having teenagers in school, and then I hope to start attending more conventions. In my work as a business analyst, I love going to business analyst conferences, and I think going to an atheist conference would just be the bomb. It'd be great.
Excellent. Well, is there any last thing you want to throw in that we skipped or missed over? Nothing comes to mind?
No, nothing specific. I did forgot to tell you that one of the things I did in between realizing going to Bible school and meeting my first husband is my mother and I started a ministry where we traveled around New England doing vacation Bible schools for churches that were too small to do their own. And in that realm, I was a gospel clown. And so I would dress up and I would go into the park and make balloons and hand out tracts. So this whole scary clown thing, I was the scary clown who told you were going to hell.
Well, for 2 or 3 years, I actually helped my wife do vacation Bible school. So I have my own sins to make up for.
Yes.
Well, Gwen, thank you so much for being on the Phil Ferguson Show. And I look forward to seeing you somewhere at a conference.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This is Phil Ferguson with Polaris Financial Planning, the home of science-based investing. I see people owning really bad investments all of the time. Many advisors are paid a commission by a big company to sell you something you may not need. It's kind of like church. They create fear, then they tell you what you want to hear, and then they take your money. What you want is an advisor that is paid only by you. That is a fee-only fiduciary advisor. Remember, people work for who they are paid by. You can contact me, Phil, at PolarisFinancialPlanning.com, or listen to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. Each show, we have an interesting investing skeptically topic and an interview with someone fighting to end religion. Polaris also gives 10% of gross revenue to support the growing secular movement. You're not just getting better investments, you're helping to change the world.
The cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. our contemplations of the cosmos stir us. There's a tingling in the spine, a catch in the voice, a faint sensation as if a distant memory of falling from a great height. We know we are approaching the grandest of mysteries. The size and age of the cosmos are beyond ordinary human understanding. Lost somewhere between immensity and eternity is our tiny planetary home, the Earth. For the first time, we have the power to decide the fate of our planet and ourselves. This is a time of great danger, but our species is young and curious and brave. It shows much promise. In the last few millennia, we have made the most astonishing and unexpected discoveries about the cosmos and our place within it. I believe our future depends powerfully on how well we understand this cosmos in which we float like a mote of dust in the morning sky.
We wish to pursue the truth no matter where it leads. But to find the truth, we need imagination and skepticism both. We will not be afraid to speculate, but we will be careful to distinguish speculation from fact. The cosmos is full beyond measure of elegant truths, of exquisite interrelationships, of the awesome machinery of nature.
The surface of the Earth is the shore of the cosmic ocean. On this shore, we've learned most of what we know. Recently, we've waded a little way out, maybe ankle deep, and the water seems inviting. Some part of our being knows this is where we came from. We long to return. And we can, because the cosmos is also within us. We're made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself.
Welcome back, and of course you are still listening to The Phil Ferguson Show, and we have our special episode about people who used to be religious and are now not religious. And with me now is Brian Fields. How are you, Brian?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good, thanks.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Now, I understand at some point as a youth you were at least partially religious. How was that?
I actually, when I was growing up, I grew up in a very fundamentalist household, and it was a long journey for me out of religion. In general, when I was a teenager, when I left Christianity, I actually became a pagan for a while before finally giving up religion about a decade ago.
Now, you said fundamentalist as a child. What kind of fundamentalist?
Churches of God, General Conference.
Churches of God?
Yeah.
Wow. I don't actually know them. Tell me a little bit about the philosophy there.
It's rooted in Calvinism. They're kind of similar to like Assemblies of God, except one minor point of doctrine, I guess, is rather than believing that everybody should speak in tongues, that it's just more of if you can speak in tongues, it's a gift of the Spirit.
So not everyone could speak in tongues.
Right.
Could you?
No.
No. Did you try?
No, and I guess that's kind of one of those things where this kind of struck me about every religion that I was involved in, about Christianity and about paganism, is there's always that expectation of, supernatural guidance. God speaks to you, or speaking in tongues, or when I was a pagan, that you would do magic and cast spells and do things like that. And the fact of the matter is that none of that ever really worked for me. I never felt God speak to me, or any of these things that my friends and family would talk about. I never felt any kind of connection to God. I tried, and to not feel a connection to God is something that a lot of people rarely admit to when they're in the middle of religion, and that, you know, there are some people who do feel it, you know, through pressure and you know, various understood psychological phenomena. But for me, it just never worked for me, and that kind of is part of what gave me permission to eventually give up is the fact that none of it ever really worked for me. And even though I tried really hard.
Sure.
It just wasn't there.
No, I assume your family was in it as well. And did that work out okay? That never really caused you problems?
Well, there's friction, certainly.
I mean, as a kid.
As a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I left religion, when I left Christianity as a teenager, I didn't tell a whole lot of people about it.
Right.
I just stopped going to church, and that was acceptable. I didn't really say that I was not a Christian until a little bit later on, and that was a difficult conversation. My brother is, I believe he's a believer, but we don't talk much. He's conservative. His politics are very different than my own. My mom is kind of liberal in some areas and conservative in others. She definitely doesn't like the fact that I don't believe in God. And my extended family, you know, I'm kind of a little bit of a black sheep.
Yeah. And so, you know, as a kid, it didn't really cause too much heartburn, I guess, if I can state that. And you did have a story a little bit about going to, I guess, kind of your own version of Jesus camp.
Yeah. Well, there's a camp in central Pennsylvania called Camp Ulijua. It's the church camp for Churches of God, and they frequently do these assemblies where they try to teach the kids, you know, different lessons about God, and one in particular was rather traumatic for me. I had recently lost my grandmother. My dad had died when I was quite young, and this was his mom, and so I was pretty close to her, and it was pretty devastating when she died. Shortly after that, I had gone to a church camp, and they had this assembly. They called all the students together, or all the campers together. And I was sitting in the back with my friends and then talking to them. And then all of a sudden I see that they've wheeled a coffin out on the stage. And I had this extreme emotional reaction. I think was connected to my grandmother's recent death. And then I had this weird moment of clarity where I realized that I was angry because I was being emotionally manipulated.
That they were actively trying to mess with you by bringing out this coffin.
Yeah. And I was angry because I realized what the message was going to be. It was going to be about your own mortality. I felt that a actual believer in God wouldn't ever want to teach kids by manipulating this way, making them feel like that. And I was angry about it. It turns out I never went up to look in the coffin, but I'd found out from other kids that were there that did, because they invited everybody to go up and look, that there was a full-length mirror in the coffin. And so the intention was to teach the kids that they should accept Jesus before it's too late.
Yeah, you better do it now because the end is any day, apparently.
Yeah, essentially.
Was that something, was the end is near something that your church taught, or is that just, you could die?
No, well, every believer has the belief that the rapture is going to happen in their lifetime. It's an egotistical idea that they've been waiting for their entire lives, and it's right around the corner, and all they have to do is wait. And they themselves aren't actually going to die, because the rapture is going to happen, even though everybody else has died before them, has thought pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, my favorite is always the 2,000 years of any day now.
Right, exactly.
And so, you had this little psychological manipulation attempt that kind of pissed you off. Did that get you out of the church right then, or it just made you upset?
No. I mean, it would be nice to say, that was the end of it. But for me, it just made me mistrust what I was being taught. I still believed in God. I still wanted to have that connection to him. So my solution was to go back and start reading the Bible. I started from the beginning and worked through the end. I reread several books, trying to make sense of what I was reading. And in the end, I couldn't. What I found was frankly horrific. I couldn't reconcile the idea of an all-good, all-knowing, all-powerful God with what I was reading on the pages.
So for you, reading the Bible kind of broke the spell in a way.
Yeah. Well, at least of Christianity. I mean, like I said, I did become a pagan after a while. I ran into some friends and the idea was, well, if you're looking for something to believe in and you can't believe in Jesus, maybe, some other religious tradition might work for you.
Yeah, it sounds like a very reasonable thought process. You tried paganism for a while and that didn't work, I assume?
Yeah, it's kind of more the same. I mean, paganism is the way it's practiced in at least in the U.S. And in much of the developed world is kind of a reimagining of classic mythology. A lot of the stories they tell are very rarely accurate in any way, shape, or form, but it's perfectly okay because many pagans don't believe in any kind of universal truth. Things can be true for them and not true for other people, which is a really weird way of looking to the world as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think so. And so what would you consider yourself now?
I am a Gnostic atheist humanist.
Now, you've used the word Gnostic. Explain that to me.
I believe that there's no God, and I know for certain that there's no God.
Well, that's a pretty high bar, it seems like, to stake your claim on.
I'm perfectly willing to argue that point.
Not really the format of the show, nor do I want to discourage it. I generally go more with just straight up evangelical atheist for myself.
Yeah, I look at it this way. I don't believe that it's reasonable to morph the definition of God into something that any human being could possibly imagine a God might be. I think that as soon as you create a term that has no definition, that you've basically, there's no point in using the word at that point. I think that I'm just as comfortable saying that I know that God doesn't exist to the same degree that I can say I know Santa Claus doesn't exist, or I know that vampires don't exist, or I know that ghosts don't exist.
Right.
And I think that the epistemic justification that we use is just as reasonable for Santa Claus as it is for God.
Well, the thing that I heard when you were talking about redefining the word, when someone says to me that God is love, and I go, well, we already have a word for that. It's called love. What do you need to make another? Or God is the universe. Well, actually, the universe is the universe. So what do you need the word God for at all? What is it you're describing that's different than a universe? And if it's nothing, well, then why didn't you just use the word universe?
Right.
It's like,
it's because I think we as a society have a bias towards trying to protect the concept.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So, you had this fundamentalist church. You eventually went to Wiccan. And did I have that right? Wiccan?
Yeah. Like I said, I like to use the word pagan. I used the word Wiccan when I was younger, but I like to use the word pagan as kind of a catch-all. And then, because all of them, whether someone calls themselves a pagan or a Wiccan, in the end, they generally believe in this cafeteria idea of knowledge where you can just pick and choose whatever it is you want to believe and construct that into a religion.
Fair enough. So now that you're out, you've just gone quietly off into the sunset, or are you fighting religion now?
Oh, I'm absolutely. The Kitzmiller v. Dover trial actually inspired me to want to get involved.
Yeah, that's a Pennsylvania thing, isn't it?
Yeah, my kids. I was living in LA at the time. My kids were back here in Pennsylvania, and when I saw the trial going on, I realized the degree to which forces in religion are attempting to inject their beliefs into law and into education, and I was kind of upset about that. So I decided that I would try to figure out a way to help do something about it. I got involved. I moved back to Pennsylvania. I got involved in Pennsylvania Nonbelievers. I'm now the president of that organization. I got involved with. I worked with Scott Rhodes, who runs the Lancaster Free Thought Society. We founded a conference called the Pennsylvania State Atheist Humanist Conference, or PastaCon. And next year we'll be in our fifth year for that. I co-chair the Secular Coalition for Pennsylvania, and I'm serving on the board of Camp Quest right now.
So where can they learn more about PastaCon?
If you go to atheistpa.org, our fifth event will be in Philadelphia in October 13th through 15th, 2017. I'm really excited. We just announced we're doing for the second year our Atheists Fight Hunger program, and for every 25 cents that people can donate, we can feed one person one meal. Last year we raised $7,575 and we fed over 30,000 people. This year, if you want to donate, you can go to atheistpa.org/fighthunger, all one word, all lowercase.
And of course, Philadelphia is a very fun city to go to a conference.
Absolutely. There's a lot to see and do, and a great public transportation system.
Well, the other thing I did notice there, it struck me when I was there a couple of years ago, the taxi cabs, they have the phone number on the side of the cab, and apparently there's a 666 telephone exchange in Philadelphia.
I wasn't actually aware of that. That's funny.
Yeah, I kept trying to get a picture of the cabs because they were like 666 and then some other number, and it was something, obviously you're on the East Coast and no one gives a shit that it's 666.
Yep.
Whereas if that a cab company tried to set up in Tulsa or Little Rock or something, the local people would be freaking out because it says 666 on the cabs.
Well, in Philadelphia, that's true, but I think in the mid-state that may not fly either.
Fair enough.
Pennsylvania is a state with contrasts, and famously, it was said that Pennsylvania is Philadelphia and Pittsburgh with Alabama in between.
That's funny. I just used that quote an episode or two ago.
Right.
We had on a congressional historian who helped set up the Constitutional Historical Museum in Philadelphia. So,
yeah,
great. Well, Brian, what else would you like to tell us about you, your history, or what you're doing?
Like I said, I'm actively working on putting up our conference next year. Right now, we've announced people like Lawrence Krauss and Cy Babe's going to be there, and David Silverman's going to be there. There's a whole lot of great names. You can check that out on the website. That's pretty much the really big thing I'm working on right now.
Great. Well, Brian, thank you for being on the Phil Ferguson Show and sharing your story with the listeners.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Hopefully you enjoyed all of those interviews. I always love loss of faith stories, and I love how they're all unique and how they're different. And I hate how religion tries to control and, in some cases, damage people by convincing them of things that are just truly over the top, not true, and I dislike it, and I want us to fight to end religion. So I thank all the people that came on the show, and I really appreciate it. Reminder, next show is Ryan Cragen and his guidebook on how to end religion. And I wanted to go over a couple of reviews that I've got. Of course, if you know someplace other than iTunes that has reviews, leave a review. You can even let me know that you left a review, and maybe I'll have time to fit it in at the end of the show. But the first two are from iTunes. The first one is Skeptic Owl. It says, Phil gives fantastic financial advice as well as having on excellent guests. Short and sweet review. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it very much. And the next one I have is from Kung Fusion 71. Phil is a financial planner that genuinely wants to help and educate people. His show has invaluable investment information and will revisit topics that readers or reviewers will bring up if they don't understand or provide feedback on, which is awesome. I think I may have read that wrong, but you get the idea. He continues, lastly, the fact that he has great interviews for the secular community makes this show even better. It's definitely on my favorite podcast to listen to weekly. So thank you very much for that, even though I can't apparently read everything out loud correctly, but you get the idea. And it's something that one of the previous reviewers changed their 3-star rating to 4 stars. I appreciate that after I made some small adjustments in their request, and people can provide me with information. And I also have an email from Glenn. I don't know if I have permission for the whole name, so we'll just go with Glenn. Hi, Phil. Just wanted to throw in my 2 cents for another visit with Raymond Smock. That was the show from the previous week. I'll admit to having low expectations for the topic, being anything other than boring, but much to my surprise, I found myself attentive to every word of the history he related. Well done. Glenn goes on, another guest you may want to consider is Daniel, and Daniel, forgive me, I don't know how to pronounce your name, Batchelder, I'll just run through it, who just delivered on his Kickstarter project to author Astronomy Saves the World, with donations going to the Secular Student Alliance. So, Glenn, thank you for the kind words about Raymond Smock. And yes, it was something a little different, but the history of the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives and the Constitution was great fun, and I really enjoyed it. The awkward thing was that I stopped recording and we talked another half an hour, and so that's lost to the sands of time. But I'm sure at some point I'll have Mr. Smock back on. I have contacted the author of Astronomy Saves the World, and we have an interview scheduled to come up. So maybe in January that'll be up. I'm thinking I might take a week off between Christmas and New Year's. So that will wrap up the show for today. If you have any questions about investments, you can contact me, Phil, at Polaris Financial Planning. Otherwise, have a great holiday season and Merry fucking Christmas. Ciao.
One, two, three. 1, 2, 3.
He died for our sins on the cross.
Technology not on his side.
Had much more luck in a Ford pickup truck.
That's what Jesus would drive.
Terrain in the desert is treacherous.
In a Honda you'd barely survive.
God's only kid needs a ride that won't skid.
Ford is what Jesus would drive. 12 disciples don't fit in a Pacer. A gun rack don't fit no Subaru. So if you're a truck buyer,
Living in the desert makes you thirsty.
Hanging on a cross makes you think.
Jack Daniels, not water, can soothe that stigmata.
That's what Jesus would drink. 12 disciples make great drinking buddies, but Judas can get on your nerves when your best friend's shyster.
Don't drink Jägermeister.
Jack
is what Jesus would serve. What would Jesus do? Lead by American like you're supposed to do. What would Jesus do?
His crown
of thorns would bleed
red, white, and blue.
Not all folks liked what he stood for,
No, they didn't. They thought that their blasphemes were cute.
but they weren't.
He'd have taught them a lesson with his old Smith and Wesson. 'Cause that's what Jesus would shoot. 12 disciples are not to be messed with. Jesus you never refute, so you best not be stepping.
He's got an automatic weapon.
'Cause that's what your Jesus, your sin-saving Jesus, your truck-loving, liquor-craving, gun-toting,
flag-waving.
That's what Jesus would do.